budget study session, May 5th. Happy Cinco de Mayo. And could I please have a roll call?
Of course, Madam Chair. Commissioner Justin Green.
Here.
Commissioner Hank Hughes.
Here.
Commissioner Anna Hamilton.
Here.
And Commissioner Bustamante will be joining us online soon.
Yeah, she said she'd be late.
Yep. And Chair Anna Hansen.
I am present. Next, we'll go on to approval of the agenda.
Madam Chair, move to approve the agenda.
Second.
I have a motion by Commissioner Hamilton, a second by Commissioner Hughes. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Then we will go to presentation and discussion of FY 2024 budget development. Manager Schaefer and department directors. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, we're going to start actually with Deputy County Manager Elias Bernardino, who's going to talk a bit about the proposed Public Safety Administrative Services Division. We're starting there because it impacts the first three departments whose budgets you'll hear today, namely the Corrections Department, the Fire Department, and the Regional Emergency Communication Center. So I will start to project Elias's PowerPoint presentation and turn it over to him.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Commissioners.
Welcome, Deputy Manager Bernardino.
And happy Cinco de Mayo. About a year ago, when I was tasked to support public safety, I noticed that we had some difficulties when it came to submitting packets in terms of board packets or finance, even financial reporting. So we had a very difficult time to understand just the budget overall. The warden, the fire chief, Lindsay at that time, and RECC director, Buster, I think it was, who was at that time. And so this ASD concept is going to help us bring some of these systems in place. And so I'll read some of the presentation for you. We believe that if we were to create an ASD, it would be crucial in delivering financial sound services that align with county's strategic objectives and core competencies, which include customer focus, collaboration, accountability, fiscal responsibility, and communication. The opportunity for us is the way the budget is structured currently. We have some FTEs that's sprinkled throughout these three different departments, as Manager Schaefer indicated earlier, which is the fire, fire, corrections, and I believe some in finance as well. And so that is comprised of the operations manager, 4 accountants, 2 accountant seniors, accounting tech senior, department administrator, administrative assistant, 1 a project manager, and 3 secretary seniors. And what you'll see is what the next proposal would be, and I think that's the next. There's a few second delay. As a result of this siloed structure, not all public safety, right before. Yes, correct.
Might have to drive.
There we go. Thank
Do
you.
you need an administrative services division?
That was a good joke. Thank you. So consolidating these positions into a single ASD would address the above issues, allow the creation of a much-needed data manager position, allow for operations manager position to be reclassified to a division director position. This would be accomplished at a net cost of approximately $7,700. Since two positions, a secretary senior and account tech, would be eliminated to create the data manager position and fund the reclassification of the operations manager. And this is what the ASD division would look like in public safety. We would have a data manager and an ASD director. The ASD director would oversee the accountant senior, two accountant seniors, a project manager, and a department administrator. And just to put it in perspective on the need for such structure, when Director Buster, what was his name? Brown, that's right, thank you. When he departed, we didn't have systems in place, and it was all based on institutional knowledge of the administrative position and or the director at that time. So we were all scrambling and trying to identify what does the budget look like, what are the vendors, the contract management, IT services, and it took us about a year to start collecting information to have a good understanding. Having an ASD, we would have a systemic approach. In the event that one person leaves, we have procedures and systems in place amongst other employees. And I'll talk more about the different functions within the ASD concept. So the data and analytics support. Data is a powerful tool that is available to organizations at a staggering scale. When harnessed correctly, it has the potential to drive decision-making, impact strategy formulation, and improve organizational performance. I have this mantra where I say that we are very data-rich, but very insightful poor. And in public safety, we have a lot of data that we don't leverage to benefit ourselves or improve our operations. And the goal of this concept is to really understand and do some data mining and put some type of dashboards that make sense for us as we start evolving in public safety. Finance and accounting support. Our finance reporting systems are critical to the long-term success of our organization. To fully leverage all available reporting and ensure accuracy, it is essential to utilize the right tools and technologies. When evaluating options for financial analysis, we prioritize specific factors such as reliability and precision. One of the things that we've changed specifically in the last 6 months is we meet with leadership of each department, so corrections, fire, and RECC on a bi-weekly basis. When I first started at public safety, we would meet with fire, and it was approximately a 4 to 5 hour meeting because there was a lot of questions about the budget. They didn't understand the reporting, and there's just more questions than answers. Now, my understanding, I haven't been in, at least in the last few months, but my understanding is it's about a 30-minute conversation, and they're getting a lot more than they used to. They get a status of, where's the status of my PO, where's the status of my RFP. They're getting a lot more information than what they used to, or at least what they're accustomed to. The budget process was much smoother this year round because the leadership understood their budgets better and understood what accounts we needed to use and leverage. So we were very nimble during this budget process. The administrative support, this is the part where we are struggling right now, is they play a crucial role in providing essential administrative support. They undertake a wide range of tasks, such as drafting business correspondence, managing paper and electronic filing systems, conducting online and offline research, creating and maintaining databases, and so forth. One of the part that we noticed is that some of the leadership, they do need administrative tasks, and they end up doing those administrative tasks themselves. So they're spending anywhere between 10 to 30% just doing administrative tasks. And we listed some of those on this PowerPoint slide so you can get an idea. And what we would do here is have a hub where leadership can lean on and really put the administrative task and in order and have any support. For example, to submit any packet for procurement, there needs to be an IPR, I believe is the form. And that requires tedious tasks to put names, vendor names, and so forth. This group would be able to support that process. And also they would be able to support district chiefs. There is a big administrative task. The most recent one is we had to do paperwork, and it required leadership to do a lot of tasks and a lot of back and forth between the district chiefs. If we had this system, these personnels in place, they can do most of the heavy lifting on completing those forms, and it's just a matter of approving them with leadership and so forth.
So a few things that I would add in terms of technically how this would work is that we would, create on the budget side, and Yvonne can correct me if I'm wrong, it would be a cost center in the general fund is where the funding for these positions would reside. They would be set up and organized as Elias mentioned, but practically, again, the cost would be in a cost center within the general fund. If this concept were approved, you would see a corresponding reduction in the budgets of the affected divisions and departments, since money that had been going from the general fund to support their operations would instead stay in the general fund in order to fund these positions in the specific cost center set up for that purpose. Elias and I'd be pleased to answer any questions you have at this time. I would also respectfully suggest that it would be appropriate and useful if you want to ask the individual department heads, Chief Black, Warden Williams, and Director Lujan, how this concept might benefit them. It may be useful to helping inform that discussion as well. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Hamilton.
So I can see a lot of appeal to this. It makes a lot of sense. I mean, I'd love to hear, like Manager Schaefer suggested, maybe from department heads, but presumably they've participated in the discussion of this. And so I also know that, public safety is all there in one campus, but they're not all in the same building. Is there a physical layout that would make sense where everybody feels they have access to the administrative people and get supported? I mean, even something as simple as like calls come into the sheriff's office or the fire department, or not 911 calls, just calls to the offices, and people answer those calls. And part of the question is you just get used to having your support staff right there in the same building with you. So what would be the physical structure that would support this?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Hamilton, we are in the process of finalizing a redesign of the fire area. One of the goals is to bring most of the fire personnel into one campus, because right now they are split. And through that redesign is we also have the ability to bring the ASD in there. Right now, corrections has, and it's just part of the process, they have 2 accountants that rotate at corrections, so they do have somebody readily available there to answer any questions. Fire, we're right next door. RECC is just down the hallway. We would still be available to the departments. We would just be in a more bubble within the building.
Yeah, and it wasn't a loaded question, because I know, like, RECCs, that's being redeveloped, and there's construction going to go on, so it doesn't have to be settled. I presume everybody's happy with that, with the idea of that kind of change.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Hamilton, I will let them speak to that. So that way they can tell you that the feedback that I've gotten from them is that the biggest change is that the communication between our current operations manager and her team has increased tremendously, and the customer service is there improved, and the financial reporting that are currently receiving is right on point in terms of the support that they're getting.
Current operations manager?
The current operations manager.
Is that in fire or in?
It's, well, we don't have a good structure right now.
Oh, okay.
She reports to me. However, I think the funding is coming from finance.
Got it. So it's almost like halfway to what this would be. That's interesting. I mean, really, the source of the question was not specific to here. It's like history of having done, been involved in this sort of thing before, and then having lots of, one of the big complaints is that, but now all the people are over there in that office and we don't have any direct support, even if it's in the same building. Like, the people who support fire are now in another division, and the people who support RECC are now in another division. I don't know that it would happen here. I just have experienced that before, and that's really the only reason I'm asking.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioner Hamilton, and it's a great question. And as Elias mentioned, I think as part of the redesign of the public safety campus, they will be centrally located. And I think the one thing that I would emphasize is by having the ASD report directly to Elias, it should help strip away what I'll call parochial claims to the asset, right? Because he's there to help support all of the departments and divisions, and so very much from an operational perspective, has the utmost vested interest to make sure that everybody is getting what they need, regardless of the physical layout, because ultimately it all rolls up to him. So I would just mention that as well. Thank you.
Right, thank you, and that makes sense. So thanks, and thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Hamilton. Commissioner Hughes?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have one question, and this is more to my ignorance of how everything works anyway. So who else reports to the Deputy County Manager? We're adding these 2 positions, Data Manager and ASD Director, but who else reports to that Deputy County Manager, who is Elias, I assume?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Hughes, currently I have the Director of Community Services, the Warden, and the Fire Chief.
So with these 2, you'd have 5 direct reports?
That is correct.
Okay, well, that's a good span of control. Otherwise, sounds like a good idea to me. Well, it does sound like a good idea to me. Thank you.
And in addition, I would just note, they're not direct reports, but just to complete the picture is that Elias is also the liaison to the Sheriff's Office, to the County Clerk, as well as to RECC Director Lujan. So he does help support those operations, but obviously for a variety of reasons, they're not direct reports of his.
Oh, okay, well, then who does Director Lujan report to, if not Elias?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Hughes, the RECC Board of Directors.
Oh, exactly. Thank you. Forgot about them.
Thank you. I have a few questions. So on that last point, have we made any progress on working on the JPA with RECC?
Madam Chair, Commissioners, as I believe everyone is aware, we have contracted with an independent third party to analyze the operations of the RECC, and as part of their scope of work, they are also going to be looking at governance issues as well as potential funding issues. I believe that there was a desire on the part of our partners, the town of Edgewood and the city of Santa Fe, to wait to receive the benefit of that consultant's work before they discussed in earnest how we might revisit the JPA, which I don't think is an unreasonable position for them to take.
Okay, that sounds good. And then once again, would you go over, who reports to Deputy County Manager Bernardino? We have Community Services, we have the Warden.
The fire chief, and then he is also the liaison to the county clerk, the county sheriff, and to RECC Director Roberto Lujan.
Okay. Okay, on this chart, the data manager only reports to the deputy county manager. I don't see him reporting anywhere else, or am I missing something?
Madam Chair, that is correct.
Okay. So he reports to you, then how does the data get to everyone else?
The goal right now is in hopes that if the board approves this concept, and when we are successful at hiring a data manager, he or she would start working within the databases with fire and RECC and start collecting some type of dashboard. So I would work closely with this person and start creating some dashboards that we can present to the fire chief and RECC, so that way we have at least a conceptual dashboard, and then from there we start learning more about the operations. So they would work collaboratively, and the information sometimes crosses over between RECC data and the fire chief's databases that they currently hold.
So, Director Lujan, since we were suggested to ask you how you feel about this, I'm taking the opportunity to do so. Or how you see this, or, you know, feel, might not be the correct word, but how you interpret this.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With this restructuring would provide a lot of support and loss of historical data and knowledge that was lost over the past several years as several operations managers and accountants within the Fire and Public Safety Division retired or resigned. When that happened, there was no way to share their historical knowledge. It was either lost or just not communicated amongst the new members. So I believe that having an additional team that focuses strictly on data and account management would really assist us and also assist our operations, because I wouldn't have to focus as much on doing the accounting side. I would be able to focus on staff and making sure that we're adequately staffed in the future.
And how adequately staffed are you at the moment?
Right now, we have 27 vacancies out of 50.
Okay, so 50% basically.
Yes.
Even less.
Yes.
So that's serious, I think.
It is very serious.
And I know that we've been doing what we can to continue to help you get more staff, and we will continue to do that, because the RECC is an important function of the county.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And I see some big changes on the horizon that are going to help us with staffing. I'm optimistic.
That sounds fantastic. Thank you so much. I just wanted to hear your input. I don't see Chief Black, or, oh, he's on WebEx. Chief Black, do you have anything you'd like to say?
Madam Chair, yes, ma'am. I see a huge potential in the formation of this administrative support services division, especially when it comes to supporting our district chiefs, as there is a large administrative burden that has been placed upon the district staff. In addition, this division will help put into place practices and systems so that it will aid in transitions whenever leadership comes through, whether it's through the ASD division or through the fire division. There will be consistency in systems and processes to allow for continuity of services, which I believe will be incredibly beneficial to the county.
Okay. Commissioner Green?
Oh, thank you. I like the idea of sort of combining these things, so and creating a pool that can be shared across these similar areas. One question is that out there are these two accountant seniors, one with two accountant, or both with two accountants, and one with an accounting tech senior. Is there a reason they seem potentially redundant? Is there a reason that's not a singular pool with a? Is there a reason it's divided that way?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Green, there is a rationale behind it. Currently, the way we inherited the current structure is there were an accountant senior and two accountants in corrections, and in fire, I believe there's an accountant senior and three accountant techs, I believe, right? And they only dedicated their time to those two units. So RCC had no support. So what we're doing now is training and building capacity within the two teams, and we're going to do some cross-functioning training so that way one accountant senior and his or her team can really support the organization as a whole and be more familiar with the budget of all of the three units that we are supporting, which is RACC, fire, and corrections. And so that allows us to have multiple resources in the event that one individual leaves, we're not losing momentum. And that's the reason it's structured that way for right now. Eventually, we will have a cohesive team, and we would be able to have one accountant senior be able to support. Right now, we have Sean, who's accountant senior, supporting RACC when it comes to budget analysis and any type of pro forma concepts if we need them.
So this looks like a transitional thing. Like ultimately it would become a single pool and a single accountant pool for all three of these organizations as opposed to two individual teams.
That is correct. We would have the group cross-function. Right now, they're not trained on both. They're really putting procedures in place. We had manual processes before, and currently the operations manager has been training them on how to leverage the current technology so that we can be a much more proficient and efficient. And eventually, if this is approved, we will be working on making sure that both accountant seniors are familiar with any of the three departments' budgets, just to leverage the resources that we have.
And then last question, is there a reason the sheriff's department isn't in this as a sort of public safety division sort of rationale?
I think the undersheriff is here. You can ask him that. I think we have to prove that it works first, and then our hopes is that we'll be able to offer these services to them as well.
Yeah, I had not finished calling. I wanted to ask the warden. Also, I was not leaving anybody out. I just went to Commissioner Green to ask some questions, so I didn't want you to think that I didn't see you here and didn't want to call on you. Okay, Warden, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. I think this is a better use of the positions. At least for my department, these 2 positions have been vacated for quite some time. They're not going to affect my overall operations, and I think in terms of customer service, we're usually thinking of that term as a service to the public, and I think this is a customer service for public safety within the county. So I think this is definitely something that's going to benefit all of public safety in a way that will help all of us, all of our individual departments with customer service and also saving time, getting some of the lengthy processes that we normally have expedited. So I'm supportive of it.
That is good to hear. I don't have any problem with the fact that there's 2 accountants and that they're overstaffed, because finance is something that is meticulous and deserves a lot of attention. And so I personally would prefer to see more employees in that position than less, just because I care so much about financial responsibility, and with the state that we're in of employment, it's always better to have 2 than 1, just from my perspective.
Yeah, from my perspective, there were 2 that could have been competing as opposed to a senior, a deputy, and a pool of accountants, but it's fine. It seems like it's a transitional plan now.
Yeah, so I think it's a good move, because it looks like we'll be able to offer more support, to our constituents and our staff, which I think is the goal, is to make sure that we're operating in a high function level. So, Under Sheriff Johnson, do you have anything you'd like to say? I know you're not kind of in this mix quite yet, but and welcome, and thank you for being here.
The commission. From what I've heard, it sounds like a really good idea. I think it would be beneficial for the public safety departments to have this in place. Currently, our accounting department has a really good working relationship with finance and Yvonne and her team, and we've been able to, just to work directly with them but I think that's a good idea, and if it really works out, I think it might be something that, we could talk with the manager's office about.
Thank you. Thank you for being here also. So if there's no other questions, we'll move on to the budget study session packet material. Are you ready for that, or am I missing something?
No, thank you, Madam Chair. Nope, that will be where we head. We're going to start with the Corrections Department. The one thing that I would highlight relative to corrections, which is not reflected in the budget in terms of what we anticipate will be the ultimate scope of the project, is efforts to increase our ability to provide medically monitored and medication-assisted detox services for our population. As you probably recall from the adult detention facility jail visit and the presentation that was provided to the board before we went to the jail, there's a staggering number of people coming into our facility who are testing positive for fentanyl. Almost 63% of the individuals who tested positive for a substance tested positive for fentanyl. 80% of the individuals who tested positive for a substance upon intake had 2 or more substances for which they tested positive. So it's a staggering challenge that we're facing in the adult detention facility. And again, of the individuals who were tested upon intake, 86% of them tested positive. So we don't test 100% of the population because it is voluntary, but in terms of those that were tested, which was almost half of our intake, 86% of them tested positive. We've been working collaboratively with the warden as well as with the Community Services Department to look at various ways in which we might be able to enhance our detoxification services. And the next step in the evolution of that dialogue and development of a plan is to evaluate facility options for what that might look like. And right now, I think it's fair to say that the 2 primary things we've looked at is a potential dormitory-style detoxification unit, which is, I believe, as I understand it, what the Bernalillo County Metropolitan Detention Center uses. It would also be somewhat similar to what the Recovery Center uses at La Sala on Galisteo Street. Another option that we at least want to evaluate is potentially building or expanding a medical unit with detoxification services specifically in mind. And so that could potentially be a different facility layout and facility build. But in any event, what's in the budget is $60,000 for a medical and detox space analysis. And then that will be a building block for a plan that we hope to bring back to you at mid-year in terms of here's what we recommend in terms of facility upgrades, and here's what we would recommend in terms of staffing for that. But again, I wanted to emphasize, that that's an area of managerial focus, and what you're seeing in the budget is just a building block for a future set of recommendations as to how we can move forward to deal with the fact that so many of our customers coming into the adult detention facility, are in fact testing positive for fentanyl as well as other substances. So with that, by way of general overview, I would then turn quickly.
Manager Miller, Manager Schaefer, I'm sorry.
If I had a dime for every time that happened this week,
Okay. I don't want to lose my thought. The money that we got from the opioid settlement, can that be used for some of this detox facility?
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Yes, most definitely it can. You will see in the presentation for the various, or for fire and for corrections, we have proposed some limited use of those funds, but we are recommending that we revisit the use of those at mid-year when we have this plan in place, because we do anticipate, again, the facilities needs is a bit of an unknown, but in terms of actually contracting with a service provider to provide this type of medically monitored and assisted detox services, our estimate, depending upon what Medicaid monies may be available, is you're likely looking at 7 figures per year. And so it's going to be an expensive proposition to move in this direction, and we wanted to make sure that we had a firm grasp of what that was before we started spending down those funds. But again, that is our hope, is to bring that to you at mid-year. But the short answer to your question is yes, they can be used for, I believe, both purposes.
I'm going to go to Commissioner Hughes, although I realize that probably many of our questions will be answered in the process.
Thank you. This is a quick question, and it relates to what we were just talking about. Are we considering in this plan all forms of medically assisted treatment, including methadone and other things? I mean, I was really impressed with the program we have already, but recognize that that doesn't work for everybody.
Madam Chair, Commissioner, I think the short answer is yes, but I would just come back to the fact that we're really focused on detoxification services. So the primary population for these enhanced services is going to be individuals who aren't in our custody for very long. And so these are individuals that would be for, again, our average, I think, stay is 48 hours, thereabouts. And so that's really going to be the primary target population, is for those individuals. Looking beyond, so long story short, it's complementary to and not in conflict with the Matrix program, which again is there primarily to serve those our longer staying population, whereas I think these services are going to be very much focused on the individuals who we don't anticipate will be with us for very long.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hughes. Thank you. So let's just, I'm going to not take any more questions. I'm going to let you get through the presentation, and then we'll ask questions. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So in terms of our summary sheet, you'll see that there were not insubstantial reductions in the corrections operating budget as presented. As the board's aware, the court system appropriately took responsibility for electronic monitoring, which is, again, basically pretrial detention services. And so we were able to work with the the court to close our electronic monitoring program, and that results in not insubstantial savings. Relative to the temp nursing services, we don't anticipate necessarily that the cost to us of temp nursing services will go down. Rather, this was an effort to better align the resources that we ask for with our actual needs, by which I mean we were budgeting for temp nursing services at a high level while also budgeting and assuming that we would be fully staffed in our own nursing FTEs. And this reduction is meant to reflect the fact that those two things are in balance. So if we have more of our own nurses, we'll need less temporary nursing services. And conversely, if we have a lot of vacancies in our own nursing FTE, there will be money that will be available to pay for the temp services. You don't have to budget for it in both places. So that was the idea as to why that amount could be reduced. The other significant reduction was a one-time water bill correction from our own water utilities to the corrections department to correct an error in previous billings. The implementation of class and comp and CBA salary adjustments totaled in excess of $1 million when you fully implement that in the upcoming fiscal year. In terms of recurring expenditures and initiatives, we are anticipating an increased need for Vivitrol injections to assist those suffering from opioid use disorder, and we're proposing to fund that from our opioid funds rather than from the general fund. We did work with the Corrections Department to try and identify some savings. Again, the estimate and understanding is that all of these reductions can be absorbed without negatively impacting operations based upon refined estimates and historic averages. In terms of non-recurring expenditures, we do have a request for almost $100,000 for a plumbing consultant to help the Corrections Division identify sources of as well as solutions to some recurring plumbing issues at the facility. And then here's the $60,000 that I mentioned relative to medical and detox space analysis. There were no FTE or new FTE or reclassification request. And with that, I'll turn quickly to the fixed asset request, and I would defer to the warden and to Elias if you have any specific questions, but we've listed out the not insignificant list of fixed asset request, I believe all of which county management supports, with the exception of 2 new vehicles, which the department, in consultation with VERB, agreed to defer until fiscal year 2025. We did include a general category for miscellaneous IT and medical equipment. It's not an insubstantial amount, but we had hoped to preserve some budget authority so that we could avail ourselves of opportunities that present themselves during the year, as well as respond to unknown needs in this area. And that could also include potential upgrades to the facilities wiring so that we can, I believe, charge and maintain various equipment. So that's it for the corrections budget, and I'd be happy to answer any questions and would defer most specific questions to the warden and to Elias. Thank you.
Okay, are there any questions, Commissioner Hamilton?
No, just a quick question. I should probably be able to figure it out on my own, but presumably, like when we went on the tour and we talked a fair amount, it was to good benefit about the rewiring to be able to support Wi-Fi and, you know, medical monitoring and that sort of thing. And presumably that's in here.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Hamilton, you're going to be seeing in your second meeting in May a bar to support additional services and equipment for the Wi-Fi and the corrections facility.
So
that's
some
gonna
of
be
it's in this year's budget?
correct.
Got it.
Correct. Yeah, you're going to see a bar come through the BCC packet second May, I don't know what, I can't remember the date.
30th?
Thank you. May 30th for your approval and review.
Thanks.
Any other questions from the board? Commissioner Hughes?
Just a general question. Is there anything in this budget you're concerned about, Warden?
Madam Chair, Commissioner, thank you for asking, and no, I feel very comfortable with our budget this year and the support we've gotten. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Hamilton?
I guess the other similar question is for personnel, and we had talked about, you know, the strategies, and that was a great idea, and that's reflected in this also. There's enough money here to support what we talked about in attempting to up the staffing.
Yes, Madam Chair and Commissioner Hamilton, that is correct.
So I also feel, and I felt neglected to mention that Commissioner Bustamante has joined us, and you have a question?
Madam Chair, thank you, and my apologies for the tardiness, family matter. Madam Chair, Assistant Manager, is there anything else in the bar that we would want to make sure that we're considering that will be coming up as we review the details of this?
Going to help us move forward with the efforts on enhancing our Wi-Fi capabilities.
Okay, thank you, Warden, for being here and taking the time away from the facility. We appreciate it. we'll
Thank you, Madam Chair. Moving on to the Fire Department, and again, Chief Black is participating in today's meeting virtually, so he is available for any questions that you might have relative to specific items that we're going to address at a summary level. So looking at the Fire Department's budget, significant increases from the previous fiscal year until to fiscal year 2024 include almost $500,000 to implement the class and comp and CBA salary adjustments. There were also several positions that were frozen within the fire department that are unfrozen this fiscal year. That's resulting in an increase of about $700,000. There were several relatively small recurring expenditure increases that are called out in the summary presentation that sum up to about $100,000. We then did work with the fire department to go through and identify some areas in which we could potentially reduce the requested operating budget to better reflect historical trends and reasonably anticipated concrete needs. They are detailed under proposed reductions, totaling approximately $241,500. And again, I would emphasize that to the extent, those reductions prove to be too much, we do budget contingency funds specifically to meet unanticipated needs. And so there's always that backstop, if necessary, in the event that we overshot the reductions. In terms of non-recurring request, we're requesting $125,000 to update the county's hazard mitigation plan. The fire department did have several requests for new FTEs and reclassifications. They included Mobile Integrated Health, or COOP program lead, which we are proposing to fund using opioid funds. In addition, the fire department did request 4, I believe, new firefighter EMT positions. As I understand it, that will help both with regard to brownouts of our facility in the Aldea, Las Campanas area. It will also help us staff the La Puebla station, which is important as we are experiencing challenges providing adequate coverage in that area from district members during normal working hours. And so that's the rationale for those positions. With regard to 2 other requests that were put forward by the fire department and in collaboration with the fire department as we prioritize their request, I think there's agreement to defer a request for a quartermaster, an additional quartermaster position, as well as an assistant fire marshal. In terms, and it may be a good stopping point there, I would invite Chief Black to add to anything that I mentioned relative to the proposed additional FTEs, but also spend a few moments talking about how his volunteer staffing plan relates to the Mobile Integrated Health team and his plans to, again, further augment that program using volunteer members. Chief Black.
Manager Schaefer, thank you very much. Yes, so regarding the FTE requests, specifically the 4 additional firefighter EMT positions, as Manager Schaefer said, that will be of utmost importance as we address staffing and keeping our stations fully operational in the Las Campanas area, as well as we look to expand services up to La Puebla Station 1 as well with our regional staff. Specifically regarding the mobile integrated health lead, that individual will be that
Chief
FTE
Black,
position. Yes, ma'am.
you're a little, you're breaking up just a little bit. Can you refresh or check your channel or look?
Yes, stand by 1 moment.
So let's try again and see if that's better.
All right, can you hear me now? Is that any better?
Yes.
All right. So
Yes,
the
it's better.
community, great. So the community, the mobile integrated health lead, that individual, that FTE request will be an individual that will be leading the current position, and then also really looking to develop that mobile integrated health and COOP team and expanding services throughout the county and building new opportunities within our volunteer districts. That was one thing that many of our district chiefs showed quite a bit of interest in, as there's a number of district members that are looking to serve potentially in areas that are not 911, not 911 response. So with that being said, we can engage our district members with who are EMT basics, and there's a community medical officer. There's a community medical officer program that is a 2-day program that is something that we are looking to expand and get offer to our district members that will really be able to expand COOP services throughout the entire county. And so we believe that this is an integral part in our volunteer staffing plan as we look to offer new opportunities of service for our district members. And with that, I stand for any questions.
Thank you, Chief Black. Commissioner Green?
Thank you, Chief, and thank you, Greg and Elias. In terms of the MIHO or the COOP, that's one position that is additionally staffed? Or is that 2?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Green, that is one additional person, FTE, that will expand that team to be a total team of 3, as we have a social worker and 1 COOP specialist that works in that team now. So that would expand that team to 3. And specifically, we, after much deliberation, we decided that 1 FTE is what we can looking at now as we hope to build that team out in the future to more FTEs. We are concerned about just staffing and seeing a challenge in staffing our current and filling our current vacancies. And so we believe that 1 additional FTE would be a step in the right direction and looking to build more in the future.
Thank you. I agree. That's a step in the right direction. I know in my district, that response team is what it has a big impact on the community up there and seems to be well received. So I really appreciate that. I think there's some of the training that they go through that could probably be pushed and cross-trained to some other folks that are in the medical space up there, whether they're EMSs and so on. Thank you. That seems to be a pretty innovative way to respond to our situation. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Green. Other questions? Commissioner Hughes?
Just a quick question, Chief Black, how does this budget relate to the reorganization that you're working on? Does this contemplate the reorganization? Thank you.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Hughes, yes, sir. This budget does represent the reorganization that I'll be bringing forward next BCC on May 9th. And it does support that, as well as it's intended to support the volunteer staffing plan as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hughes. Commissioner Hamilton?
I think that was partly one of my questions, but just to, there are items in this budget that anticipate some of the revisions to retention that you've put in your volunteer plan?
excuse me, Madam Chair, Commissioner Hamilton, yes, ma'am. So specifically, at the high level, there are some things that we will be able to address with our district budgets, such as mailings, publications, things of that nature. When it comes to additional budgets within the department, such as the stipend program, we left that as a flat budget. That is something that we have not come close to reaching the max of, and with anticipated increase and in the stipends, as well as anticipated increase within the number of volunteer members, we are anticipating that we will stay within budget this fiscal year. However, in future fiscal years, we will be assessing that to see if we need to increase that for the stipend program.
Great, that makes sense. And then similarly, like you're unfreezing positions, so presumably you're going to have, and also looking to recruit more volunteers as well as paid staff. So presumably you're going to have to run more academies. Is that, I assume the training budget is in here for that, but that's my question, is it?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Hamilton, yes, ma'am. The budget does capture the in-state travel needed to go to Sapporo for the certification burns, as well as all of the PPE and uniform needs as well.
Great, thanks. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Hamilton. Any other questions? Okay. Back to you, Greg.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. I'm not going to spend a lot of time discussing the fixed asset request of the department. You all are generally familiar with the operations of the fire department, as well as the very intense equipment needs, both within our regional team as well as in our district team. And the fixed asset request certainly reflect that. You know, I would ask Chief Black to, briefly address the proposed software relative to, bear with me, the Vector Solutions Check-It. I believe this is in part relating to previous observations by our internal audit group relative to both asset inventory as well as routine management of our operations and keeping track of our daily efforts to make sure that our equipment is operational and accounted for. I would ask Chief Black to speak to that only because it was flagged by our IT department as requesting additional information, which, again, I believe that I've received, but I would want the board to hear as well. Chief Black.
Manager Schaefer, thank you, sir. Yes, sir. So the Vector Solutions Check-It software gives us the capabilities of doing one and two things. The first is tracking all of our narcotics use and storage department-wide for our regional crews as well as our district crews. So that would allow us to track all of our controlled substances that are on our ambulances that our ALS and intermediates are able to provide when they are on calls. Secondly, it does also address the fact it does allow us to begin the digital software version ability to track our fixed assets. We are currently weighing two different options. One is utilizing ImageTrend, which is our reporting software. We have district staff and regional staff evaluating that to see if that would be an avenue in order for us to pursue fixed asset tracking. However, this Vector Solutions will primarily be focused on the controlled substances to begin with. However, if it does seem to be working well for fixed asset tracking, and that is determined to be the better solution, we will be addressing expanding that service through specifically utilization of our fire funds through districts and administrative fire funds that are set forth by the state of New Mexico's Fire Marshal's Office. So those are things that we are looking at specifically regarding to the software vector solutions.
And the last point that I would make relative to the fixed asset summary is I think just by its breadth, I hope it underscores why the ASD concept would help the fire department, because they have a tremendous amount of purchasing that they hope to get done any given fiscal year. Be happy to answer any additional questions on the fixed assets. Thank you.
Any questions from the board?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Bustamante.
What is if you can just give me an example of an inventory exempt item?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Bustamante, inventory exempt items are items that are below our capitalization threshold. The county capitalizes all fixed asset requests that exceed $3,000. So anything below $3,000 and above $500 is inventory exempt. So we still have to track it as inventory, but just not capitalize it and depreciate it.
Madam Chair, Yvonne, do you have an example, like a chair?
Laptops.
Laptops, okay, thank you.
Commissioner Green.
Thank you. How does this general large gross, $2,800,000 capitalized equipment budget compare to previous years?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Green, the fire department tends to have a significantly large budget because their budget includes several grant funding. So we have the fire marshal, which is they use some of it for operations, but they usually use it to build savings, to buy apparatuses, large equipment, whatnot. Same thing with the fire excise tax, as well as impact fees. So they tend to have large requests because they are looking for the bigger pieces of equipment. I would have to go back and look unless Chief Black has any additional information as far as what the requests were last year. I'm not quite positive, but between the fire department, public works, and the sheriff's department, they usually have the largest fixed asset requests.
I would assume so. I'm just wondering, was last year 3 million, was last year 2 million, was last year 5, and is it a relatively stable number over year, more or less?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Green, I'm not positive. I just know that those departments usually have the largest amounts. I'm just not sure if there's like significant fluctuations between years. It all also depends on exactly where a district may be in purchasing an apparatus. So one district may, as they're saving up, they might ask to put aside $50,000, $100,000, and then all of a sudden the next year the full amount is available for them to make that purchase. So it would actually have, I think it would be kind of like a wave, kind of up and down, just depending on how well they've done at saving funding or also finding additional funding to help with those purchases.
Great. And then along those lines, is there an inventory that shows that we have 5 pumpers, one of them going to be retired in a year, one retired in 2 years, one retired in 3 years, and so on? So we start to look multiple years, in the life cycle of some of these big ticket items.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Green, I would defer that to Jacob, but I would assume that I believe the fire department does have like a 5-year capital plan where they look at their inventory and the aging, but I would defer to Chief Black to be able to provide more information on that.
Thank you, Director Herrera. Madam Chair, Commissioner Green. So yes, sir, there is a 5-year capital plan with apparatus. That is something that we are looking to refine, especially given the complexities of the environment that we're working in regarding increasing apparatus costs as well as delivery times. We're looking at delivery times of upwards to over 3 years when we purchase a new apparatus now. And so that is something that we will be revisiting and refining as we move forward into future fiscal years.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? I don't see any. So we can go on. Manager Schaefer.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. We'll move forward to our Regional Emergency Communication Center. Looking at significant changes from the fiscal year 2023 operating budget, you have the implementation of the class and comp as well as CBA contracted adjustments. I'd note that, there were a few what Yvonne scored as reconciling items. The reclassification of specialist positions to specialist 1, basic or advanced, that's an effort to try and capture in the budget the fact that as vacant positions are filled at a lower level, that results at least in a temporary savings in the fiscal year in which that happens. As we attract members into those positions and they're trained up to become emergency communication specialists, the budget will increase. But nonetheless, to provide the board with an accurate picture of what we anticipate happening, Yvonne demonstrated that there will be some salary savings this year because we would be filling at least significant numbers of our vacant positions with entry-level team members who will be trained up over time. And again, that doesn't mean that positions were eliminated here. It just reflects the budgetary impact of that. The quality assurance specialist was eliminated as part of contract negotiations, if I'm not mistaken, with the union representing RECC bargaining unit members. And I believe the time that decision was made, it was determined that position would not be needed. There were several positions that were frozen during the last budget cycle, and the $420,000 reflects the fact that those positions are being unfrozen. We did, as we scrubbed the budget, determine that there was a duplicate FTE that was listed, and so the budget was adjusted to reflect the fact that the communication center position was reclassified to the deputy director of the RECC. Moving down to major contracts and initiatives, the equipment maintenance really reflects efforts to take increased or augment our maintenance of our hardware through a contract with IT Connect. And that includes taking them offline, and I'll let Director Lujan speak to that, but also cleaning them. And then there's also a component related to the state radio network, which I'll let Director Lujan address both of those issues.
Thank you, Manager Schaefer. So the IT Connect services are going to provide cleaning services to RECC twice a year. Prior to their services, which we just had them finish up their first service with us, there was no cable management or cleaning of the machines that run 24/7 within the RECC, which put them at risk to crash or cause significant technical problems. IT Connect will come in twice a year, ensure that all the cables are managed and wrapped up properly, connected properly, as well as cleaning all the machines to ensure that they last the appropriate amount of time. And as far as the DTRS state radio network, that's going to be the service upgrade agreement that the county's entering with Motorola. And that includes the city's move to the state digital trunked radio system, and also maintenance of all of our consoles and radio consoles within the RECC and upgrades as well to ensure that we're with the latest and greatest that's in alignment with the state network. Also puts us where we should be as far as operating and ensuring that we're on the right equipment and modern equipment.
In addition, we've listed the fact that there are certain modules that were purchased for use by our first responders, city PD, city fire, sheriff's office, county fire. They were all procured as part of Central Square's so-called One Solution, but those modules are not, in fact, used by RECC for its day-to-day operations, and the cost of that is split amongst the responder agencies, and this was an effort to capture that as part of the budgetary process, so that that was acknowledged by everyone and didn't have RECC having negative line items as the budget goes forward. If you dig deep into the details of the budget for the Sheriff's Office and the Fire Department, you would see that they budget for their share of those non-CAD One Solution modules. I think we may have double booked the so-called SUA-2 maintenance and support agreement, but to underscore what Director Lujan was mentioning, as we move to utilizing the core of the statewide public safety radio system, there is a maintenance agreement that is required to be entered into in order to ensure that we are, in fact, maintaining our system so as to be compatible with the statewide system. And I'll let Director Lujan address the VMware software.
The VMware software is going to provide security to our systems, our internal systems within RECC. Since they're not on the county network, they need their own protection. So that's what that is going to provide for us.
The last two items in terms of noting reductions that we were able to find in working with Director Lujan is to reduce the budget for temporary services as well as the budget for overtime. Again, the idea being that the amount that are spent in both areas are directly influenced by our staffing levels. The higher our staffing levels, the less overtime we need, the less temp services we need. The lower our staffing levels, the more that we'll need. But again, if we ended up needing more temp services or overtime, that could be funded through vacancy savings. Moving on to the fixed asset request. Several capital-related expenditures are still pending with the RECC board, and in particular, the City of Santa Fe relative to agreement on fiscal responsibility for those. That is noted in the request. County management would support the Esri server if our partners likewise supported it. The other items that are listed as pending information or pending the board, again, I've described what those are. In addition, Director Lujan brought forward the idea of a contingent capital fund. Again, that's something that county management would support, but we would require a policy and agreement with our partners before we started collecting funds as to how those funds could be used and for what purposes. But we support the general intention of Director Lujan, as we did have at least one instance this past fiscal year in which a necessary purchase was unnecessarily delayed as we were waiting for our partners to make their contribution towards the purchase. That's the genesis for it, and again, we don't have that policy and agreement in place now, and that's why it's listed the way that it is. So with that, I would stand for any questions relative to the RECC's operating budget or fixed asset request.
Commissioner Green?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, guys. Three questions. One related to our partnership up in the north with Espanola. Do we have a contribution to their RECC or their equivalent emergency 911 system that is in this budget, or where would that appear if we do or do not?
No, Madam Chair, Commissioner Green, this budget does not include any funds specifically for a contribution to the Rio Arriba County Consolidated Dispatch Center.
Follow up on that, does that mean that that would be somewhere else, or we're not contributing?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Green, Yvonne might recall the details. We have not been making regular contributions to the Rio Arriba County Consolidated Dispatch Center for a number of years. We formerly were a party to the Joint Powers Agreement that created that center, but the county withdrew from it some time ago. The RECC board was recently approached by the Rio Arriba County Espanola Consolidated Dispatch Center to begin discussions of potential involvement with their center in some way, but I think it's fair to say that they were fairly preliminary at this point and had not advanced to the level that we were making a budgetary request for them. I hope that answers the question.
It does, thank you. I know, just to give the detail, that I've been approached from the folks up in Espanola that they thought the number was somewhere in the $40,000 range a year to support their services up there, and they do actually receive calls for some of our district, and so or some of our county. So just to put that on the radar and to be a good partner and a good, give them their due if it's available. Another question has to do with the staffing. Are we looking? You mentioned a lot of vacancies, and while I hope you're very successful in filling those vacancies, are we getting a little more innovative in the types of positions that we're offering? This is a pretty intense and probably a pretty highly trained position, but some folks might want to do this job as a second job and work nights and weekends, or do some of these other things that couldn't work for 40 hours or 50 or 60 with overtime, but definitely work Friday and Saturday nights. And you go, man, that's the time that we need to have somebody that works for us for 12 hours a week, and it fills a critical time, and it's probably peak time for calls and so on. So
we have discussed that a number of times, but it would be good to hear what Director Lujan thinks about that.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioner Green. So with that type of schedule, someone who can only work a certain amount of hours or be part-time, there's a lot of training and requirements that are involved. We'd have to be able to ensure that they could commit to attending the 3-week Department of Public Safety Academy, and also maintaining that certification with 20 hours of biannual training. In addition to that, they would need to be able to handle medical calls, which would also require 24 hours of biannual training and a 3-day course that they would have to attend. So far, we've had the temps that are coming in to help part-time and when they're available, but as far as creating a position for a part-time dispatcher, based on my experience with other agencies and just reading about what's going on with other agencies, it's pretty unsuccessful.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Hughes?
Thank you. Just related to that, and those were good questions. How many temp people are we employing at the moment?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Hughes, right now we have 2 temps that are assisting frequently. At one point we had 4, but they have taken on full-time jobs at either other dispatch centers or have moved away from Santa Fe. So right now we have 2 that are assisting frequently.
Thank you. And I guess, is this one of the areas that we're thinking of in terms of we're saving? I know we're setting aside like $4 million for staffing needs that we don't meet otherwise. Seeing how this budget works and the increases we're giving, is this one of the areas we're going to look at early on? And I guess I'm saying I hope it is, because it seems like we've left this unstaffed or understaffed, for too long, and it would be a good idea to make sure, if this budget isn't bringing salaries up to what they need to be, that we should, see what else we need to do. I guess that's a question for the manager.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioner Hughes. The short answer is yes. We believe that this budget, with the cooperation with the union, would provide adequate funds along with the recommended 6% COLA to make significant headways relative to the staffing issues.
Okay, and I guess I was saying beyond that, if we need to do more, maybe let's look at that in a few months or first quarter of the year, something like that. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Hearing none, I think we can move on. Thank you, Director Lujan, for being with us, and good luck. And we hope that we find more people to hire every single day for your office.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. I appreciate your support.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners, and Under Sheriff Ken Johnson is here to answer any specific questions that you might have relative to the Sheriff's Office request. Looking at the budget for the Sheriff's Office, significant increase of in excess of $500,000 related to the implementation of the class and comp system, as well as CBA, collective bargaining agreement negotiated contractual increases for law enforcement personnel. Looking at a specific request of the Sheriff's Department in terms of new contracts or initiatives, the Sheriff's Office did request an increase of $150,000 to their overtime budget. I believe we've worked with the Undersheriff and the Sheriff to explain why we believe that vacancy savings could be used in the event that that increase in overtime materialized, and that there's agreement relative to that recommendation. I think in terms of other new initiatives and requests, there was increase in equipment and vehicle maintenance, which the Undersheriff could address if you have any specific questions. But there was also a request to invest in the public safety psychology group in order to provide specific public safety oriented psychological services, I believe mostly for the general stress of the job, but also critical incident debriefs, if I'm not mistaken. Finally, there were several technological enhancements, including virtual training through Vertra Inc., digital data analysis for the investigations division, which I believe is what Cellebrite is. And then finally, live scan fingerprinting, which enables us to take digital fingerprints, if I'm not mistaken. In terms of new FTEs and reclassifications, we didn't catch one thing that is not recommended in the amount of $8,094, and specifically that was the requested reclassification of a records clerk to secretary senior. I know that our HR department has worked with the sheriff himself to discuss ways in which we can enhance our recruitment efforts there, as well as broaden the talent pool. So at this point in time, that reclassification is no longer requested or recommended. In terms of the fixed asset request of the Sheriff's Department, it is listed in their fixed asset summary. We do recommend in the County Manager's Office all of the recommended requests. I would highlight a few things that may be of interest. Specifically, there is a request for 2 drones. The idea there is to better be able to help with search and rescue operations, as well as searches for individuals who are wanted by law enforcement. Use of drones is a more effective way to do that, as well as a safer way for our officers, if I'm not mistaken. In addition, there is a request for a soft body public safety robot, which I understand is, again, a means by which our law enforcement may be able to better assess a situation without putting officers at risk. The robots, if I'm not mistaken, have cameras and other sensors that enable officers from the outside to gain intel on the inside. Is that accurate, Undersheriff?
That's correct, Manager.
And then finally, I would highlight and turn it over to the undersheriff. For the sheriff's SWAT team, there is a request for a 40 millimeter tactical 4-shot launcher. My understanding is that notwithstanding its name, it's actually a less lethal form of munition, and I'd let the undersheriff address that.
Thank you, Manager.
Welcome, Under Sheriff Johnson. It's good to see you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the commission. The manager is correct in the fact that that is a tool that shoots less lethal projectiles, in the hope that it'll incapacitate an individual without, fatally injuring them. So hopefully we can assess and take the situation, make it safe without anyone, dying. This tool, we currently use these on patrol in a single shot capacity. This particular item is designed for large scale events such as protests and where there's a large number of people. So hopefully this is an item that we won't need, but we do need to possess it in case we do encounter those situations.
Any questions from the
Madam
board?
Chair, I just have to say for the record, I hope we don't have to incapacitate people for a protest. I think there would be other good reasons to use it, but that one just made me a little nervous in that statement. But
Yeah, and I think in the most violent of cases, what we've experienced is there's been a lot of peaceful protests where there's no need to use any type of
Understood.
tools. Yes.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Commissioner Hughes?
Thank you. I just wanted to comment that I'm happy to see that now that I'm too old to do search and rescue, you have drones to do that, which will be much more effective than I was even when I was 30 years old and could run up the trail very fast. But I know the search and rescue community has been looking forward to the day when drones would be able to assist and cover ground more quickly than people can. Thank you.
Commissioner Green?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I see 29 vehicles here in a variety of patrol vehicles and F-150s and SUVs and trucks. And I'm wondering if electric vehicles or hybrids are being explored for this, and if even if we're not ready for an electric vehicle per se, if we could start testing them, because we're going to get there. And I know from my experience of migrating my fleet to electric vehicles, there was the fear factor, and then we realized that, in fact, there was no reason to be fearful about it. We could use electric vehicles pretty much 100% of the time. So I'm wondering if there's a plan to migrate to that, if there's a chance to include at least one test vehicle for each use case, and so on.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Green, thank you. That's a great question. We've actually been exploring electric vehicles, just looking into it to get information. Right now, I don't know how feasible it is for law enforcement due to the infrastructure, but we do have it on our radar. We are exploring it. In fact, me and the sheriff recently had a presentation from Chevrolet regarding a electric truck that is being developed and should be available to law enforcement, I believe, in the next year. So that's a possibility moving forward. Right now, they're a little pricey, a little expensive, but that's something that we're looking at for the future.
If, I know that the F-150s are about that price range right there, and you'd probably make up the difference in a fuel savings pretty quickly, like $128,000 per vehicle. I think they're around 140 right now. So with the amount of miles that you put on a vehicle, I think you would be able to test one, and you'd have your deputies fighting over who got to take that home. But seriously, that's like, I have a fleet of vehicles, and my drivers do not want the gas vehicles. It becomes a recruiting tool, even. So your vacancies, you name it, everything, everybody loves getting in that electric car, so.
Thank you, Commissioner Green. I think you know I support that 100% and have brought that up many times. But I also want to point out that in order for us to do that, we need high-speed charging stations. And because without the the high-speed charging station that law enforcement needs, because this is a situation where they cannot wait 20 minutes. They need, a dedicated car and, need to be able to fill it up with the charge in a rather quick manner. So that is another thing that adds to the expense, but at the same time, something that I agree we need to start looking at.
That's my recommendation, to try to test it, like get a charger, get one car, see how it works, so that a year from now, we would be able to, when the next fleet of 20-something cars comes down a year from now, that we would be saying, we're all electric. So, but, thanks.
I mean, I know that they have electric cars in the Los Angeles fleet. I believe the LA County Sheriff's fleet is, or it is the police in Los Angeles. I'm not positive which one.
They use BMW i3s, and they've been using them for about 10 years now.
Yeah. So it's out there, it's coming, so let's pay attention. Any other questions? Commissioner Bustamante?
Madam Chair, Sheriff Johnson, I have a question, and I can stand corrected. Wasn't there only one animal control officer in January? Have we had more people hired? Are there any, and the reason that's leading, I see that we have 2 animal control units. At the time we went through our orientation, I understood there was only 1 animal control officer, and there were a number of trucks, which was sad, and when I went over there to take a dead goat, but that's another story. There were a number of vehicles parked off of the Caja, and I'm wondering if we've had any luck recruiting additional animal control officers who would use these new vehicles, and if those other vehicles that were parked behind the center there, for the ones that were county, if those are just retired fleet. That is just an issue of clarification, and maybe it would be county manager Schaefer, who would answer that for us.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Bustamante, thank you for the question. Currently, right now, we have 3, and you're correct, we did have 1, but we do have 3 animal control officers at the moment, and these vehicles would be to replace existing vehicles that are getting close to end of life. And so our goal is to continue our recruiting efforts and fill all of the animal control positions. We have 7 that were allotted, and hopefully we'll be able to fill those with the recruiting efforts and with this class and comp study. I think that's really going to help us.
Thank you very much.
Under Sheriff Johnson, it's good to hear that we have a few more officers in animal control, so thank you. Any other questions from the board? Okay, seeing none. Manager Schaefer?
That is all for today. Thank you, Chair and Commissioners, for your time.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Hughes.
I just wanted to thank Manager Schaefer for this setup of the budget process and allowing us to ask questions about each department. I find it very helpful.
Absolutely.
And I think it's great to have a little more interaction than we've had in the past. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? I also want to thank staff and everyone for being here and the work that we have been able to accomplish. Under Sheriff Johnson?
Yeah, Madam Chair and Commissioners, I just wanted to say, thank you for the support that the commission continues to give the sheriff's office, and, our thank you to the manager's office. We've been working really well with them, and, they're always there to support the sheriff's office, and I just want to make that known and give a public thank you.
We appreciate that, and please give our regards to Sheriff Mendoza. We miss not seeing him, but we're happy to see you.
Yes, ma'am, I will pass it along.
Okay, thank you, and with that, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved?
Second.
Okay, so by Commissioner Green, a motion to adjourn, and second by Commissioner Hamilton. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful Cinco de Mayo and a 4th of July. That's what I wanted to say to